Imagine walking down a familiar street only to find yourself transported decades into the past. In this video, we explore the eerie phenomenon of time slips with real-life accounts that defy explanation. From an otherworldly hotel stay to an encounter with Marie Antoinette and a vanishing British airfield, these creepy tales are guaranteed to give goosebumps. Time slips can work both ways though. Keep watching until the end to find out what happened when a man from the late 1800s allegedly found himself on a busy 20th century Times Square. For now, prepare to step into the unknown and question everything you know about reality as we dive into 4 chilling time slip stories. What could be more intriguing than going on holiday only to find yourself in a different time as well as a different country? Strange as it sounds, that's exactly what happened in 1979 to 2 British couples by the names of Jeff and Pauline Simpson and Len and Cynthia Gisby. It was October, and worn down by the miserable British weather, the Simpsons and the Gisbys decided to grab some Mediterranean sun. The plan was to travel by ferry from Dover, then spend the next 2 weeks meandering through the countryside of France and northern Spain. As with most spur-of-the-moment trips, there wasn't much of a plan in terms of how far they'd travel each day or where they'd spend the night. They simply rolled off the ferry and steered their car south. On the outskirts of Montélimar, a picturesque town some 50 miles north of Avignon, the 2 couples decided that the time had come to stop and get some much-needed rest for the night. However, the ubiquitous Ibis Hotel, a beacon of familiarity for British travellers, was fully booked. The travellers were told that they might find some rooms at a hotel down the road. So, disappointed but not deterred, they ventured deeper into the town, following a narrow cobbled road, barely wide enough for a car, that seemed to take them back to a forgotten age. Oddly dated looking posters advertising a circus lined the walls of the old-fashioned buildings they passed, and still, there was no sign of anything that might be described as a hotel. Eventually, they stumbled upon an old-fashioned inn tucked away amidst the other ramshackle buildings. It wasn't quite what the Simpsons and the Gisbys were expecting, but a hand-painted sign indicated vacancies, so they decided to settle in for the night. The hotel itself was like a portal to another time. There were no telephones nor elevators, and the rooms oozed old-world charm, with sturdy wooden latches instead of modern locks securing the doors. The soft, luxury pillows they were expecting were replaced by bolsters, while the bed sheets were made from calico, a material not used for centuries. The plumbing system was antique, and even the windows reflected a bygone aesthetic, fitted with shutters instead of glass. There were further oddities the following morning at breakfast. 3 figures entered the dining room, their presence as out of place as the hotel itself. A woman in a long, old-fashioned dress and button boots clutched a small dog under her arm. Following her were 2 French policemen, wearing uniforms that were a far cry from what a modern gendarme might wear. When the Simpsons and the Gisbys came to settle their bill the following morning, the price they were charged only deepened the mystery. The cost for their entire stay, including breakfast for 4, was a startlingly low 19 francs, the equivalent of about £10 or $12.60 in today's money. Convinced that there'd been a mistake, they attempted to explain themselves to the manager. However, the language barrier proved insurmountable, and the manager, with a courteous smile, was adamant that everything was in order. Utterly bewildered, the couples paid their dues and departed, vowing to return for another bargain break on their way back north. But upon their return trip, a chilling realisation awaited them. While the cobbled road and the faded circus signs remained, the hotel seemed to have vanished without a trace, almost as though it had been erased from the face of the earth. The bizarre tale doesn't end here though. When the Simpsons and the Gisbys developed their holiday photos, they discovered that all the pictures they had taken at the hotel were inexplicably missing. The photos should have been nestled comfortably in the middle of the roll, yet there were no blank spaces. It was as if the camera had never captured those moments, as if the hotel and their entire experience there had simply never existed. A few years later, driven by an insatiable curiosity, The Gisbys and the Simpsons returned to the Montélimar area, desperate to find answers. This time, they stumbled upon a similar hotel, but a nagging suspicion gnawed at them. It wasn't the same. The essence, the unique character they'd experienced, was missing. Jeff Simpson even underwent hypnosis in 1985, hoping to unlock any repressed memories or any details that might shed light on the location and nature of the hotel. But the hypnosis yielded nothing. The experience remains a perplexing anomaly, just like the next story in this video. We remain in France for our next story, where, on the 10th of August 1901, two English ladies, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, were enjoying a leisurely stroll through the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. Now, an important thing to keep in mind here is that both Moberly and Jourdain were highly educated academics. Moberly was the first principal of St Hugh's College, Oxford, while Jourdain had been awarded a doctorate for her research into the works of Dante. Both were rational women, not prone to flights of fancy or tall tales. Little did they know that beneath the surface of the meticulously manicured gardens of Versailles lurked a darkness and perhaps a tear in the fabric of time itself. The further they wandered from the main paths, the more they noticed an uncanny feeling that was beginning to creep over them. The first sign of strangeness was the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The bright summer afternoon seemed to dim, and the air grew heavy and oppressive. The part of the garden that they found themselves in seemed oddly deserted, with no other tourists in sight. As they continued walking, they noticed that the landscape had undergone subtle changes. The vibrant gardens had given way to a more subdued, almost archaic setting. The trees seemed older, more twisted, and the paths were no longer the well-kept gravel that they had been walking on, but rather rough, uneven dirt tracks. Their unease grew when they encountered people dressed in strange, outdated clothing. They saw men in long coats and tricorn hats, women in full skirts with wide-brimmed hats, and even a few people carrying farm tools. None of these figures acknowledged their presence, apparently engrossed in their own activities, moving about as if in a trance. Feeling increasingly disoriented, Moberly and Jourdain decided to ask for directions. They approached a man who appeared to be a gardener. He wore an old-fashioned smock and a large straw hat, and his demeanour was unnervingly sombre. When they asked him for directions back to the main part of the gardens, he responded in an archaic dialect of French, pointing them down a narrow, overgrown path. As they followed the path, they came across a small, rustic bridge. Standing on the bridge was a woman in a long, formal dress, holding a fan and wearing an elaborate hat. Her face was pale, and her expression was one of profound sadness. She seemed to look straight through them, her eyes filled with a sorrow they couldn't comprehend. Moberly and Jourdain later identified this woman as Marie Antoinette, based on portraits they saw after returning to England. Terrified and desperate to leave, the two women quickened their pace. The oppressive atmosphere suddenly lifted as they turned a corner, and they found themselves back in the familiar, bustling part of the gardens. The sky was bright again, and the modern-day tourists were milling about as if nothing had happened. The experience left them deeply shaken. After returning to England, they conducted extensive research and were convinced that they had somehow stepped into the past, experiencing a moment from the time of the French Revolution. They documented their account in a book titled An Adventure, published under pseudonyms in 1911. Their story became one of the most famous examples of a time slip, sparking debates and intrigue for many years to come. Visiting places you're unfamiliar with always comes with risks. You might get lost, encounter unexpected dangers, or, like all the individuals mentioned in this video, find yourself in a situation that just defies rational explanation. But you don't always have to go far from home to experience this chilling sensation. Back in 1956, a seasoned Royal Air Force pilot by the name of Sir Victor Goddard was on a routine training flight over the Scottish countryside. Now, Scotland, like many other parts of the UK, has its fair share of abandoned airfields that are relics of World War II. Sir Victor knew one such spot, a deserted tarmac strip shrouded in silence. But on this particular day, something was different. As he flew over, Sir Victor was met with a sight that defied explanation. The once desolate airfield was bustling with activity. Mechanics in bright blue overalls scurried around servicing a fleet of unfamiliar aircraft. Hangars, long closed, stood open, revealing a scene straight out of a bygone era. Sir Victor, utterly bewildered, radioed in, but received only static. He circled the area, captivated by this unexpected sight. Everything looked so real, so tangible, yet this operational airfield existed in an area where there should only have been weeds and crumbling concrete. Shaken but determined, Sir Victor landed on the seemingly active runway. He was greeted by nothing. The mechanics had vanished, the planes were gone, the airfield was back to its usual desolate state, as if a scene from a movie set had been abruptly dismantled. Some accounts claim that Sir Victor, unable to shake the experience, returned to the abandoned airfield a few days later. This time, there was nothing but the familiar quiet and emptiness. Yet a chilling detail emerged. A single set of fresh blue overalls lay abandoned on the cracked tarmac, a silent reminder of his strange encounter in 1956. What happened to Sir Victor Goddard on that flight? Did he truly stumble upon a forgotten airfield bustling with activity from another time? Or was it purely psychological, a vivid hallucination triggered by the desolate landscape? And before we move on to our final time slip, we'd like to thank you for making it this far through the video. Want to see more spooky content? We're a brand new channel and your subscription would mean the absolute world to us. Please hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss a video. For our final bonus story, we delve into the perplexing case of Rudolf Fens, a tale that throws the idea of time travel into a whirlwind. Unlike the previous entries where individuals found themselves flung backwards, Rudolf Fens' experience, if true, suggests a terrifying leap forward in time. The year was 1951 and the bustling heart of New York City, Times Square, was bathed in the neon glow of its iconic signs. Suddenly, amidst the throngs of people, a commotion erupted. A bewildered man, seemingly out of place, stood frozen in the middle of the intersection. Dressed in attire reminiscent of the late 19th century, a top hat, a waistcoat and clothes that appeared strangely outdated, the man seemed utterly disoriented. Witnesses reported an expression of pure terror on his face. Tragically, before anyone could intervene, a speeding taxi slammed into the man. He was rushed to hospital, but later succumbed to his injuries. The mystery deepened when authorities examined his belongings. His wallet contained outdated currency and identification papers bearing the name Rudolf Fens. A faded receipt from a livery stable dated 1876 was another baffling clue. Understandably, the story of Rudolf Fens continues to capture the public imagination. Was he a time traveller from the past, thrust into a future he couldn't comprehend? The lack of any witnesses to his arrival and his outdated possessions certainly fueled speculation. There are others, however, who have linked it to a short story written by science fiction author Jack Finney, published just a few months before the Fens incident. The story, titled I'm Scared, features a character who inexplicably appears in Times Square dressed in outdated clothing and utterly bewildered by his surroundings. The similarities are undeniable, although what that means remains open to interpretation. And that concludes our journey into the chilling world of time slips. But are these tales simply spooky stories to tell around a campfire? Or is there a deeper truth out there, waiting to be unearthed?